This dog was fine until people did one thing. At first, there was nothing wrong with him. That's what made it confusing, not just for the staff, but for anyone who saw him for the first time. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't bark constantly. He didn't pace or panic like some of the others. If anything, he seemed calmer than most of the dogs there. He would sit quietly in his kennel, watching, not reacting. And when people walked past, he didn't rush forward like the others. He didn't try to get attention. He just observed. The kind of behavior people usually describe as easy. That's why no one thought twice about him at the beginning. He wasn't a problem. Until he was. The first time it happened, no one made a big deal of it. A volunteer walked up to his kennel, the same way they always did. Slow. Careful. Friendly. They crouched down slightly, reached toward the gate, and then he reacted, not barking, not growling first, just movement, fast, sharp. Enough to make the volunteer jump back. It didn't turn into anything worse. But it didn't need to, because once something like that happens, it changes how people see the dog. Still, they brushed it off. Maybe he was startled. Maybe it was the angle. That's what people say when something doesn't fit, because it's easier to explain it away than to admit you don't understand it. And at that point, they didn't. So they moved on. The next day, he was calm again. Same behavior as before. Quiet, still, observing, no signs of tension, no warning. Which made the first reaction feel like a fluke. Until it happened again. This time with someone else. Different person. Same approach. Same movement. And the same reaction. Fast. Direct. Unexpected. Now it wasn't just one moment. Now it was a pattern, but not a clear one. Because in between those reactions, he was fine. Completely fine. He would sit quietly while people walked past. He would watch staff move around. He didn't react to noise, didn't react to other dogs, only sometimes to people. And not all people. That's what made it worse. If he reacted to everyone, it would make sense. If he reacted to no one, it would make sense. But this didn't make sense. And when something doesn't make sense, people get uncomfortable. So they started changing how they approached him. More distance, slower movements, shorter interactions. But that didn't fix it. Because the reaction wasn't about speed, it wasn't about distance, it wasn't even about fear. They just didn't know that yet. Over the next few weeks, they started watching more closely, trying to find a pattern. Anything that explained it. They looked at timing, morning versus afternoon, feeding times, noise levels, other dogs nearby. Nothing matched. Then they looked at people. Different heights, different voices, different energy. Still nothing clear. Because whatever was triggering him was subtle. Too subtle to notice right away. And that's what made it dangerous. Not because he was out of control, but because people couldn't predict him. And unpredictability is what people fear the most. That's when they started pulling him back. Less exposure, less interaction. Not because they gave up on him, because they didn't trust what they didn't understand. And slowly, he started getting labeled. Unpredictable, reactive, not safe. And once those labels stick, they don't come off easily. But there was still something that didn't fit. Because even with all of that, he was still calm most of the time, still controlled, still watching, like he was waiting, not reacting randomly, responding to something specific. They just couldn't see what it was. Until one day, someone did something different. Not on purpose, not because they were testing anything, just by accident. A staff member walked up to his kennel, same as always. But this time, they didn't stop. They didn't crouch. They didn't reach toward him. They just stood there. For a second, nothing happened. Then they took a step back, and he didn't react. Not even a little. That was the first time anyone had seen that, because usually the reaction came before that point, before distance changed, before anything obvious. But this time, nothing. That's when something clicked. Not completely. Not yet, but enough to make them question everything they had assumed. So they tried it again. Same approach, same distance. But this time, they changed one thing. They didn't reach forward. They just stood still. And again, nothing happened. No reaction, no tension, just observation. And suddenly, the pattern started to make sense, because every time he had reacted before, someone had done the same thing. Not loudly, not aggressively, just naturally. They reached toward him. That was it. That was the trigger. Not people, not movement, not fear. The reach. The moment a hand moved toward him. Before anything else happened, that's when he reacted. Because to him, that moment meant something. Something they hadn't understood. And once they saw it, they couldn't ignore it, because now the behavior made sense. He wasn't unpredictable. He was consistent. They just hadn't been seeing the pattern. And that changed everything, because now they could work with it. They stopped reaching toward him, stopped pushing that moment. Instead, they waited, let him move first, let him close the distance. And slowly, something started to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. He started stepping forward again. Not all the way, but enough. Enough to show curiosity. Enough to show interest. And over time, that curiosity turned into something else. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. And possibility is where everything starts. Because once a dog believes something different can happen, they start behaving differently. And that's what they saw. Not a new dog, the same dog. Responding to a different approach, because he had never been the problem. The misunderstanding was. And once that changed, everything else followed. He didn't become perfect. He didn't suddenly love everyone. But he stopped reacting. Stopped expecting the same thing to happen. And that was enough. Because in a place like that, being possible is everything. And sometimes, that's all it takes.